I couldn't be more pleased that James Tate is able to come out here and read from his most recent chapbook publication, The Zoo Club, which it was Rain Taxi's honor to put into the world this summer. My pleasure multiplied, however, on learning that he wouldn't be coming out from Western Mass alone, and that we'd get to hear tonight from another author who has been published in Rain Taxi's Brainstorm series, Dara Wier. Born and raised south of New Orleans, but a longtime resident of Western Mass, Dara Wier has produced 11 books of poetry that have won her increasing admiration, awards, and best of all, the envy of other poets. As her reputation has grown, many have grappled with the amiable ferocity of Wier's language machines. I myself have overused the word dizzying in trying to convey the expressionistic force of her work, so evident in her recent and indispensable Selected Poems, which traces a poetic trajectory that runs from a highly original Southern consciousness to an idiosyncratic philosophical imagism akin to that of Wallace Stevens. But better critics than I have tried to come up with an image themselves that might capture the power of her verse. The excellent literary theorist Michael Snedeker once wrote that Wier's poetry is the slam of a shot glass on a sticky counter, and the bartender is Emily Dickinson. That's pretty good. No less than John Ashbery has opined about Wier's poetry. It may not be for the faint of heart, most intense experiences aren't, but those who stay with it will find themselves face to face with a world whose eerily sharp focus suggests recent satellite photographs of Mars, and they will never be the same again. That also is surely true. And I personally know dozens more poets, some in this very room, who agree with me that Dara Wier has quietly become among the finest poets of her generation. When once asked by an interviewer what has surprised her the most in her career as a poet, she responded, "Being alive. It's amazing." It's that amazement and the ability to be in touch with it that keeps leading her to new heights in our art form. I'm delighted you'll get to hear a little bit of her work tonight. Please welcome Dara Wier.
Thank you all so much. It's really sweet to be in Minneapolis, and it's great to be here at the Walker and to be hosted by Rain Taxi. This is a poem called Quick to Point Out. Some fine horses wait for you, a fine stash of fire, water to spare, many reasons to be shaking in our boots, many pairs of boots, some andirons in a silver ladle and a drawer full of handmade lace and other sorts of sewing handed down from afar. To stand in line like we know what we're doing. Standing in line seems to be our common disorder. Everywhere, I have to say what I want at the gas station as though I really mean it. I have to accept the fact that now and then someone will wink. I have to acknowledge that all nicknames aren't meant to belittle us. I have half a mind at all times to hide under the nearest bed, on a cold floor, whatever it's made of. I have to go to a shooting range. I have to be kind. I have been told to forget about pajamas. I have to forget about barrier islands. I have to forget about pelicans. I have to go against all of my usual inclinations. I have to throw out most of my usual ways. I have to develop a new idea about Nicotiana. I have to accept the fact that he is more serious than a pencil. I have a pencil, and it needs to be sharpened. I have to look around a room flavored with pencil shavings. I have to be unsure. I have to be next to a river. How finely tuned you and I are standing and sitting here, and we don't seem to be not shattering exactly or falling and falling and falling. I have to imagine how perfectly matched everything is to its situation. I have to stop thinking about what would happen if all the forces of nature took a vacation or went against all of their usual inclinations. I have to deliberately fail to think the next thought. I have to pretend I'm not thinking. I have to create an illusion. I have to intuit and be telepathic and tip you off to something. I have to be lit from within. I have to be at peace with the dual nature of luxurious nature and our ridiculous financial institutions. I have to picture the roots of trees deliberately moving. I have to picture the electrical wires in the ceiling. I have to picture insects in the attic, to believe I can do this, to stop picturing everything falling through space, to give words like cute and nice and sweet and iffy and pivot and shell and oil and game and think, as in think, more chances than I've given them. I have to ask you a question. I have to put something somewhere. I have to remember something importantly obscure. I have to think about petticoats. I have to go back in time. I have to stand by you. I have to keep my eyes open. I have magnification to be with. I have to look in a clock tower. I freeze. This is a few of the crimes you've committed against my heart. Arson. Most of all, arson. Tongues of flame, flare, lick, and like so many others of us, I fire and I like water and a good flaring. Larceny, a little bit of larceny. Treason, exquisitely executed, the ultra-high kind, peppered with a few petty kickbacks, like in a self-serve, brain surgery, in-and-out, same-day service, bargain-up sort of way. Buy one, get one free. You committed fog against me. You committed horses against me. You attacked me with hummingbirds. You ambushed me with iridescence. You scalped me with seeds. You blindsided me with stars. You pushed me over the edge with bumblebees. With my own heart, you strangled me. You broke into me with gills, me with lungs under my wings. With books, you electrocuted me. With words, you tore me to pieces. With inferotemporal neurons, you swindled me. You hung me with satellites, with time and distance, you slay me. You pepper sprayed me with music. You took out my eyes, so you said to polish them up a bit. You stole my chemise. You oversalted me with blizzards. You deserted me at noon. You committed rain against me. You committed sharks against me. With rivers and meadows, you lied to me. With canyons and the tops of fog-shrouded mountains, you put ravens in there to kidnap me. You burned me with songbirds and nightfall and morning. You scalded me with flocks. You stole my tongue with tides. With all of this, you put me down. There's a great magazine that lives in this town called Conduit, and this next poem I'm going to read to you, I'm happy is going to be in there someday. This poem is called Big Belt Buckles. You know what I mean. You know a big belt buckle when you see one. You know what a big belt buckle means. It means there's maybe a demon inside there. It's like a Pennsylvania Dutch barn hex sign or something or other. It's like an insignia. It's like a bead with an eye and an eyelid on it, something to think demons away. It's like a tarantula dipped in honey. It's like rain. It's like me making a cross over my left breast, a secret sign. Cross that out. Donald Barthelme never wore a big belt buckle, though he was from Texas, from where a lot of BBBs originate. And from time immemorial, many of us, many who have worn them there in Texas, were absurdly wearing them on purpose. A demon in capital letters is a demon one can deal with, a demon who says who he is. None of this will be taking into account the authentic rituals concerned with rodeo prizes. Congratulations, all you winners out there in rodeo land. We have loved you. Some women wear big belt buckles too. Pardon me, women. You know what women mean, a distraction. We are talking about what big belt buckles mean on men. One who sports a big belt buckle is saying something. What? That is the question. You is non-gender specific. Thus we love it. We is also good for the same reason. My least favorite pronouns have always been he and she. They are the only ones who delimit unnecessarily often. A scarab's beetle image would make an awesome big belt buckle. Thank you, Wallace Stevens. What else? You name it. One is in charge of everything now. All those big belt buckles have drifted off into infinity, or possibly they have evaporated and gone to where all good big belt buckles go. Yodelay, yodelay. And oh, and boo-hoo, boo-hoo to them all. We mean this sincerely. This is a very short little poem. It's called Investigating. He hates her. She resents this, but he doesn't know what to do to be less hated, to be more liked. He is seething furiously. She is goofy, looking as if she is amused by their standoff. They will have a terrible trip to Miami. This is called When I Stared Down into an Empty Ballistic Missile Silo in Nebraska. I came close to losing my balance. So tired I had been drawing a line all afternoon underwater. And at noon, parataxis had turned me into a conjunction of sorts, the best place for orphans in America I'd been seeing. And in the morning, one more silk chemise. It will take all the venal parabola I can muster to get through false. Est of est, it is so hard to do, est of est, and hardest of all to think through. And after the first, there is no other, okay, I get that, and the last, okay, that too. If it doesn't have the characteristics by which it is known, it isn't being true to its kind, okay, I get it. If a circle's not round, blah, blah, blah. My lame nostalgia for a kind of idolized innocence, I love it. How do you feel about what you were saying? How do you say what you're feeling? Looking at pictures of mirrors. There's no other way to talk about one thing than in terms of talking about something else, okay? And another thing, not talking about something else, okay, when not talking about something is elsewise. Another thing, okay, we do this so naturally. We are like dew. They say the larger the animal, the more intense sex is. Who are they? Us and all animals, all or nothing. Are you brittle, crazy glass? What do you do when you're faced with your own disruptive event? Am I not me? The job involved nothing more than pouring water for senators. Well, if that's true, we have to start all over. Part of me that is odd watches the moon, loves the pouring, hunking geese who obscure the moon, and a distant trains, oh yes, okay, lonesome, forlorn Hank Williams kind of being there. You want to give me something. This is all there is. If you want to begin, you have to go all the way back to where you never were. It is far to go there. The good news, nothing to pack, nothing to forget, nothing to remember. Look, if you find yourself thinking about your life, your tiny little real true life, and the life of eternity, don't do it. If you find yourself saying things to yourself like, well, the universe in all times seems to be about 10,000 billion years ago at least, don't do it. If you find yourself thinking there has been, there is, there will be, stop it, don't do it. If you find yourself thinking about all the suns and the moons and the stars and the comets and the rivers and mountains, one might zero in on us right this minute. Don't do it. They can't help it. It will turn you into a poet. Interrogate the drawing mercilessly, as if your life depended on it, without pity, as if your life depended on it. And a few years ago, this beautiful little chapbook was made by Rain Taxi, and I'm going to close with a section from it. It's a poem called 1,000 Words. I like to watch them changing horses in midstream. At dusk, in autumn, after leaves no longer allemande, at midnight, in moonlight, in untinted movies, in an unheated room under chilly white flowers, lamia all over the map was what Heidelberg said, denizens widespread bevels everywhere, fast-breaking fascicles and a prayer for equilibrium. They bent their brows up and down over true blue palimpsest water troughs where their fathers and their mothers had left them little love notes, be good to the wolves. There's something behind the stones back of the stove. We're sorry we called the malarial marsh the veil of health. We're sorry we couldn't afford to keep the horse. Watch out for anything they call a long leash. We put them some things aside in the tin box, in the leather case, behind the radiator. These are for you. And check between the drive shaft and the muffler. I remember you with wind all over your face. I remember you with snow all over your nose. I remember what your puzzled look wouldn't let on. I remember your comb. I remember 4 places you signed your name. I remember 2 different handwritings you used. I remember a coat you threw off of a cliff. I remember the colors you couldn't see, our initials on a roadside table. Once you dove into a lake in the middle of the night and were gone so long we thought you were never coming back. We were questioning the motives of the motives and had to slap ourselves to get over it. Make a run for it. Someone decided that all of the sports teams would be required to give us back our colors. One by one in tip-top condition. The birds aren't actually given a choice. I don't know where they go. The photographic record's drama is heightened, smart as a whip, sharp as a tack. It was a given. They'd look immediately into the closet they were warned not to open. My dreams collect insects of various kinds, and then leaves and dreams, and he goes on, some of them countenance an unacceptably rational relationship with mortality. Some of us freaked out over it, so we had a few screws loose, but we were all there. We didn't get rabid about it. When we hallucinated as one. I remember you with your head thrown back, with burning leaves making you laugh. I remember you under a live oak holding a glass. What mattered in your palace of memory, what happened to the soles of your shoes. You were the one who taught me every last hydraulic thing. Once in a laminated blue moon, as luck would have it, as if who knew, as soon as we have half a chance. I'm sorry I put a locket in my shoe and let a sailor steal it. I'm sorry I lied about where I lost my wallet. I'm sorry every last text isn't sacred. It was good sleeping on a pallet overnight in the open air in the market. I liked it when I couldn't figure from where the music was coming. It was good sweeping a sidewalk at 5 in the morning, just as rain showers stopped. Who was it you wanted to see one last time? Which was the one they cut out of the picture? What's the name of that little town in the Pyrenees? We were fired up for a good illusion. We had sometimes driven one another mad. On the other hand, sometimes we drove one another on missions of mercy. I meant what I said when I paused over our being at the mercy of a chemistry of infinite numbers. But you know I don't know what I mean. Let's talk about the butterfly with crimson red expandable wings, 8 of them. I like watching a boy try on clothes he knows no longer fit him. I remember a grown man so small he broke the mold. Is the one-legged bird lucky to be alive? One of them asked what made words flying out of my mouth make sense. One of them painted blue numbers on a black mailbox. One of them had driven straight into a fence in daylight, cold sober, uncomprehending. In the picture, a soldier is dreaming in chronological order of all of our previous wars. Thank you. Thanks a whole lot.
Wow. Thank you, Dara. And thank you for holding up that this was such a joy to make. We make very limited quantities of these, and they sort of sell out in what seems like a second. So it's a special pleasure to have James Tate here again on the occasion of having published a new chapbook by him, The Zoo Club. I forgot to bring one down here, but you can see it outside. The last time we published a chapbook by him was this one, Police Story. And I just happened to have found this in a closet today, so maybe it will be a raffle item. It's been an eventful decade for James Tate since he last visited Minneapolis, over a decade ago. In that time, he's published 3 meaty, full-length books, Memoir of the Hawk, Return to the City of White Donkeys, and The Ghost Soldiers, a volume I personally consider to be the finest collection of poetry to comment on the horrific, war-torn era in which we are still sadly immersed, and which, I can't be the first to note, creates a haunting bookend to his debut volume, The Lost Pilot, and serves to highlight the astonishing range of the body of work in between. Now, these recent books continue to branch out onto the limb of prose poetry, far past where we thought that tendril extended, toying with what we knew or expected of the form, and not always comfortably. Many have debated, are debating, whether these creations of Tate's should better be called fables or stories or even movies or plays. But having been Jim's student in a former life, I can hear him say at every turn, they're just poems. I can also hear him in the somewhat near future gently chastising me for being a little flowery in this introduction. But I don't care. The fact is, I have never met anyone else who is as deeply in love with poetry as James Tate. And it's a perennial and potent reminder to me that love is at the root of all his poetry, be it funny or tragic or absurd. In this light, all the I saids and he saids and she saids of his recent work is hardly a prose affectation, but rather an expression of how the most fragile creatures in the zoo club, i.e., we humans, are yearning to connect. His distinguished career is a testament to the magnitude of that expression, and it is surely a joy to all who read poetry that it continues at an unbroken gallop. Please join me in welcoming James Tate.
Certainly wonderful, Eric. Thank you very much. It's really nice to be back here after, I guess, 10 years. It's very nice to hear Dara's poems. Those are astonishing feats of the imagination, I guess. Yeah, so this book is, or pamphlet, I should say, is published by Rain Taxi. And that's what I'll read from. This first poem is called Love at First Sight. One night I got off early from work and decided to stop by the tavern on the way home. Tommy and Johnny and Strike were there. Strike and Tommy were playing pool. Johnny and I sat at the bar talking with the owner. His marriage had just broken up and we were trying to comfort him. You must meet a lot of women in the bar, Johnny said. Well, you do, but they're not the women you really want to take home, he said. I know what you mean, Johnny said. Maybe for one night, I said. They both laughed. Tommy and Johnny finished their game and joined us. How about a couple of beers, Strike said to the owner. The owner, Joe, reached for the spout, clutched his heart, and fell to the ground. Johnny and I screamed. Tommy jumped over the bar and grabbed the phone and called an ambulance. Joe was in the hospital a week. We visited him once. He'd had open heart surgery, but he was in good shape. He introduced us to his nurse. When he got back at the bar, he was quieter. One night when I was in there by myself, he told me, "I've met the girl of my dreams. You won't believe how sweet she is." "Who's that?" I said. "You'll have to wait and see," he said. A couple of months went by. One night, I was in there pretty much by myself, and he said, "Do you want to come over to my place Wednesday night?" So I went. When I got there, I was surprised to find the place all lit up in candles. There were a few other guests, not people from the bar. And in the living room, there was a casket with a corpse all laid out in a bridal gown. "I met her at the hospital," Joe explained. "It was love at first sight." This is called Where the Money Is. "What if I never see you again?" I said. "Oh, you will. One of these days I'll walk right back into your life," he said. It was hard to believe that exchange took place 20 years ago. Jack was my best friend at the time, but he grew vague over time. I got married, and 10 years later got divorced. Then I had a girlfriend for 5 years. I got promoted at the office. I was doing pretty well for myself. Then one day Jack showed up. He had a beard and so on, but I recognized him. I said, "You old son of a bitch, you kept your word. It's 20 years, just like you said." "I told you I'd be here, and here I am," he said. "Well, come on in." "Tell me what you've been up to," I said. We sat down in the living room, and I got us something to drink. "Now tell me all about yourself," I said. "Well, there isn't much to tell. I joined the Army when I was 19. I fought in Korea for a while. When I got out, I went to Montana and shepherded for a couple of years. When I had enough money, I bought some land in Wyoming, and that's when I started raising cattle. Before long, I had a couple hundred. Then the drought came along, and I lost them all. I didn't know what to do," he said. "What did you do?" I said. "Well, I drank for a spell. Then I started digging a hole in my backyard. I dug and I dug till I finally came across a dinosaur skeleton. Complete. I mean, it was huge. I cleaned it all off and sold it to the Natural History Museum in New York City for $1 million, he said. My God. What did you do then? I said. Well, I invested it in oil, and the well went bust, he said. What luck, I said. And what are you doing now? I'm sweeping the halls of a junior high school, he said. What a life, I said. I've never been happier, he said. Why do you suppose that is, Jack? These little kids are going to grow up to be dinosaurs, he said. They're disappearing. They're going underground. And you're going to dig them up, I said. Exactly, he said. And this is called llamas. One night I thought I saw a llama cross the road. When I got home, I called the police. There's no llamas that live around here, he said. But I saw one tonight, I said. That's what we call a hallucination, he said. Thank you for the information, I said. I never saw a llama after that, but other people did. Mother came over to visit one night. She wore a pink hat. I said, Mother, what a lovely hat. She said, it's part llama. I said, which part? I don't know. They didn't tell me, she said. Later that evening, after she had left, I found a pair of keys beneath the sofa. I thought they might be hers, so I called her. No one answered, so I forgot about it. A week passed, and I didn't hear from her, which was not unusual. But after 2 weeks, I began to wonder. I went over to her place and found it locked. I looked all around. For what, I don't know. I called the police. They said she'd probably gone on vacation. I said she would have told me. I called her every day to no avail. Then I got a postcard from South America. She was traveling with the tribe of Indians and a large herd of llamas. They were headed for Paraguay, where they were to meet up with a couple of Third Reich officers. They were going to take over the world. This is called For Rent. I sat there in the train station looking everyone over from head to toe. I was looking for one particular person, though I didn't know who that was. There was an old man wearing a bow tie and white shoes who seemed mildly suspicious, but then he left the station without turning around. And then there was a young woman who dropped her hanky by my shoe and neglected to pick it up. I was just about to leave when two young boys came skipping across the auditorium and started wrestling with one another on the full floor, not too far in front of me. One of them beat the others. One of them beat the other one's head on the floor and knocked him out. He got up and left shortly after that. I went over and checked on the other one. He wasn't breathing. I pounded his chest. I looked in his eyes. He wasn't human. He was a doll, a very big doll. I stood up and brushed my collar and went to get myself a lemonade. As I was standing there drinking, a man walked up to me and said, "You don't want your dummy?" "Oh, that's not mine. I was just visiting it," I said. "You were just visiting a dead dummy," he said. "Say, you look familiar," I said. "I rent the dead dummies," he said. I always find it strange. It doesn't happen too often, but it's a nice one of those nights when I can't see anybody, but really see them. I can now see them when I block out the lights. Okay. I was walking down the street with the laundry bag over my shoulder when a kid stopped me and said, "What do you have in that bag, mister?" "My grandmother is in this bag," I said. "Why?" he said. "She was acting real bad last night, and I hit her with a baseball bat," I said. "What are you going to do with her?" "I'm going to take her out in my boat and drop her in the middle of the lake," I said. "Can I see her?" he said. "No, she's a mess," I said. "I don't care," he said. "Her head's all bashed in," I said. "I've seen worse in the movies," he said. "Okay, give me a second," I said. I threw the bag on the ground and untied it. I opened it slowly. It was full of white feathers. The boy said, "There's no grandmother there." "I don't understand. I swear she was there," I said. "You're playing a joke on me," he said. "No, she was there, I swear," I said. "Maybe she's gone to heaven and become a saint," he said. "She was no saint," I said. "Maybe she was a chicken," he said. "She wasn't a chicken," I said. "How about a turkey?" he said. "Not a turkey," I said. He thought for a while. "I've got it. An ostrich." "She was an ostrich," he said. "I think you're right. She was incredibly fast. Her mouth was hard like a beak, and her arms were short like short wings. She was an ostrich," I said. "What were you doing with an ostrich as a grandmother?" he said. "I don't know," I said. This is called The Furnace. The doctor told me to go home and get some rest, so I went home and the furnace blew up. I called the repairman right away. A few hours later, he came in his truck and worked the rest of the day in the basement. When he came up, he was black with soot. "What do you think?" I said. "I couldn't find it," he said. "What do you mean you couldn't find it? You look like you've been inside it for hours," he said. I said, "Well, I was. But when I came out, it was nowhere in sight. It was completely gone," he said. "But look at you. You've been somewhere dark and dirty," I said. "Dark and dirty. That's a nice way to put it," he said. "Well, how would you put it?" he said. "How would you put it?" I said. "Black lace," he said. "Black lace? I don't think I know what you mean," I said. "There are roads everywhere, and none of them will get you out," he said. "But how did you get out?" I said. "I never said I was in," he said. "I don't understand," I said. "Neither did I," he said. This is called The Suspect. One night I was standing on my front porch, smoking a cigarette and having a drink when I heard a loud explosion down the street. I ran out into the street to have a look, but could see nothing. I started walking down the street slowly, looking around for a puff of smoke or anything. A girl walked out of one of the houses and started up the street. I stopped and stared at her and then began to follow her. She slowed once to look over her shoulder, and I froze. Then she went on. I had no reason to believe she was connected to the explosion. It's just that she looked like someone who would be fun to follow. That's not true. I don't know why I said that. She wore a dark hat pulled low over her eye and a black trench coat with the collar turned up. I couldn't even see her face. But then she stopped. She turned around and said to me, "Why are you following me?" "I thought maybe you set the bomb off back there," I said. "What if I did? What business is it of yours?" She said. "Oh, none, I suppose. Just curious," I said. "And you'd follow me all this way? Just out of curiosity," she said. "Just look at you. You look like the lady who lit bombs," I said. "Well, I didn't. I'm just back from visiting some gerbils," she said. "Relatives?" I said. "No, just friends." This is called To Hell and Back. There was no flour left in the cupboard, so I decided to go to the store in spite of the storm. I put on all my rain gear and headed out. It was only a short walk to the store. A man stopped me along the way and said, "Which way is the Grand Canyon?" "I have no idea." "It's not around here," I said. "I thought for sure it was just around the corner," he said. We walked on in the rain, and suddenly there was the Grand Canyon. "I never knew it was so close," I said. "I thought it was closer," he said. A man in rags offered to rent us some donkeys, and we accepted. We rode them down a steep gulch, and the sun came out, and it was 110. We rode on, and my head began to be dizzy. Buzzards circled us, expecting us to drop dead any minute. When night came, we made camp. My companion, whose name was Foreman, gathered some dead wood, and we made a fire. He produced some beans, and we had dinner. When we woke up in the morning, we were in my bed. I said, "What are we doing here?" He said, "I got your flour." This is called The Cookie. I was sleeping on the couch when I heard a light knocking on my door. It could have been the wind, but I went to see anyway. I opened the door, and who was standing there but my mother, dead these past 8 years. I said, "Mother, how nice to see you. What a surprise." She said, "Jack, I've been thinking. I was so wrong to spank you when you were 8. I feel so bad about it." I said, "I don't even remember it. We were in Ma's grocery store. I thought you stole a cookie from her cookie jar, and I spanked you. Then Ma told me she'd given it to you. I felt so bad," she said. "But Mother, I don't even remember it," I said. "That's all there is," she said. "Can I get you a glass of tea?" I said. She started to fade. "Mother," I said, "don't go. We have so much else to talk about, please." But she was gone. But wait a minute. It's coming back to me. I did steal the cookie. But Ma wanted Mother to stop spanking me. That Ma was a saint. But Mother shouldn't give up so much of her eternal time over such a small thing as a cookie. This is called The Green Shutters. As I remembered it, there was an oak tree in front of the house. Now there was no oak tree. In fact, there was no house. Just an empty plot of ground was all that was left. Oh, there were neighbors on both sides of where the house used to be, but their memories were gone. And an open space is all they remember. We no longer existed, or we never existed is more like it. I decided to test my theory. I went up to my neighbor on the left and knocked on the door. An old woman answered, a Mrs. Steinhauser, as I recalled. I asked her if she remembered the Brennans. She said no, she didn't. In fact, she had never heard of the name. I said my name was John Brennan, and I grew up in the house next door. She stared at me. I said, I know you from my childhood. She looked at me as though I were trying to sell her a faulty parachute. You used to sell us rutabagas from your garden. I'm sorry, but I don't remember you, she said. We had a dog named Fred, you said, dug in your garden, I said. I don't remember any dog, she said. I mowed your lawn one summer, I said. I don't remember that, she said. The next summer I painted your shutters green. You must recall that. I remember green shutters, she said. Well, Mrs. Steinhauser, I'm glad you remember those green shutters, even though you don't remember me. We spent 10 years next to your house, and now we are just shadows flitting about the pavement. How would you feel in our shoes, I said. Goodbye, Mr. Brennan, she said, as she shut the door. I looked at her door, then over at our yard. An emu was grazing in the pastures. This is called The Afterlife. A man fell out of the tree in our backyard. I ran over to help him. "Would you like some tea?" I said. "I think I broke my back," he said. "Perhaps some ice cream would be just the thing," I said. "Lend me your hand," he said. I gave him my hand and tried to pull him up. When he was upright, he said, "Where am I?" "You're in my backyard," I said. It's like nothing I've ever seen before," he said. "It's just an ordinary yard, a small garden, a few flowers. Yes, it's a sorry sight. How can you stand to live here?" he said. "Oh, it's my home," I said. "Home? That's a curious word," he said. "Where do you live?" I said. "Live? Live? That's a funny question," he said. "I don't live anywhere." "What do you mean?" I said. "I'm a dead man. I just float around." "Well, I've never met a dead man before. I'm pleased to meet you," I said. "I think you're supposed to scream or something," he said. "Oh, no, I'm really pleased," I said. "It's really kind of you to drop by." "I didn't drop by. It was the wind," he said. And then the wind stopped, and I fell into the tree. "How lucky for me," I said. "You'll be going with me, of course, when I leave." "You'll never be coming back," he said. This is called The Hammer to the Rescue. This morning I got up and checked the mail. The mail comes early in these parts. There was a package from Wyoming. I took it inside to open it. There were these 3 little green fingers. Not human, mind you, but fingers nonetheless. Furry things and malleable, like you'd want to touch your face. Who sent these? There was no return address. I took them out of the box and began to juggle them in the air. One scratched my eye. Another clung to my wrist. And the third one just kept dancing in the air, as if that were the normal thing to do. Then I put them back in their box. The box kept rattling. I put it in my top dresser drawer and left the room. I fixed myself some breakfast and washed the dishes. I went out onto the porch and smoked a cigarette. My neighbor came over and asked me if he could borrow a hammer. I said, "Sure," and we walked back into the shed. We talked for a while about the World Series, about gophers, murderers, saints. I liked Joe. He was a good sort. We walked back from the shed, and I told him about the hairy fingers I received in the mail. He said he'd like to see them. So I took him to the dresser and carefully opened the box. There was nothing there. You were just joshing me about those fingers, weren't you? I swear I wasn't. I don't know where they've gone, I said. I felt something crawling up my back. Just as I was about to say something, one of the fingers stuffed itself into my mouth, and the other two pressed down on my eyelids. Joe said, "What kind of a joke is this?" I said. "Ugh, ugh." He took the hammer and hit me on the head. That's the last thing I remember. This is called What Are Worms? I fled down the drain pipe, and then over the 2 hills behind the house. My wife came chasing after me. When she caught me, we fell into a hole. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "I wanted to know where you were going," she said. "This hole was not my intention," I said. "I'm sure it wasn't," she said. "Now what are we going to do?" I said. "We can either try to make ourselves comfortable or we can try to find a way out of here," she said. "A way out would be nice," I said. "Why don't I climb on your back?" she said. "Why don't I climb on yours?" I said. "Because you're the stronger," she said. "Why don't we just make ourselves at home?" I said. "There's no television." "We could carve something into the wall," I said. "But it wouldn't move," she said. "And neither would we," I said. "That's what I call a restful afternoon," she said. "Almost dead," I said. "Not quite," she said. "Why is that?" I said. "I have a cookie in my head," she said. "You have a cookie in your head?" "Yes, I have a cookie in my head," she said. "If we had a glass of milk, we could have a party." "But I don't have any milk," she said. "Do I look like a cow?" "Most certainly not. You look like you're my wife," I said. "But what are we going to do in this hole?" she said. "We're worms, aren't we?" I said. "No, we certainly aren't," she said. "And I don't know," I said. This is called the flag. The flag was still there. No, it wasn't. What am I talking about? We didn't even have a flag. This was after the war. Nobody had a flag. We didn't have anything to eat. We wore rags. We roamed the streets like zombies, gathering scraps for our babies and old men, old people. Every once in a while, we come across a turkey or a duck, and we descend on it like savages. I mean, a picture of a turkey or a duck. There was no such real animals left. We sit around the campfire and talk about the old days. Mostly nobody remembered any, but didn't remember any. Somebody would say, "Remember when we used to play baseball in the park?" And there would be a dead silence. Enoy, a former mailman, would say, "I remember everything. Baseball, football, you name it." And Grizel, a former model, would say, "I don't remember anything. It's just like this was the only thing I had ever experienced. Hunger and searching for something I'd never had." Now, Granny said, "times have been worse." "Tell me when," Ben said. "In my youth they were worse, I'll tell you that," Granny said. "Well, I wasn't there, so I can't say," Ben said. They would talk like that until the last embers were sputtering. In the morning, we would start searching again. Someone found an old burning tire. Another found a dead crow. "Things are looking good," someone said. "Better than yesterday," another said. "I found a flag," I said. "That's really great," Enoy said. "Just kidding," I said. Okay, this be the last one. Not the last one in the pamphlet, mind you, but it's the last one I'm going to read. This is called A Quiet Day on the Porch. I sat on the stoop and twiddled my thumbs. The car went by with 5 teenagers in it, shouting and yelling about something. Then a man walked by, a doctor perhaps, doing sums in his head, or so I imagined. A couple of squirrels were playing tag beneath the big elm tree. Otherwise, a quiet day on the porch. I fell asleep. A dream about an ocean voyage. 2 monkeys were chasing one another across the deck. One of them slipped and fell overboard. The other one stood and stared at the drowning one, then started dancing a sad ballet by himself until he finally slipped and drowned himself. The crowd started applauding until they finally woke me. I said, "What?" A baby robin was chirping from the branch of the elm. I stood up looking around, walked into the house. I made myself a sandwich and sat down at the table to eat it. The cheese kept squeezing out of my sandwich until I finally grabbed it and threw it on the floor. A mouse came out of the wall and started eating it. I said, "Go away, mouse, or I'll kill you." The mouse looked up to me and said, "Fat chance." And he dragged the cheese away into the unseen folds of the wall. I finished the remains of the sandwich and washed up. I walked out onto the porch and waved at a neighbor who was pushing her baby carriage up the street. There was a fire in the carriage, but the neighbors didn't seem to care. Thank you.